the news of a lawsuit that has been filed that will, by the way I read it, detonate the school funding formula in Wisconsin, making the amount of money set aside for education infinite. Rick Esenberg from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is joining me on the program to talk about this. We have the teachers union, some parent groups, which are probably tied to the teachers union, other left-wing 501 suing, claiming that Wisconsin has underfunded education, despite the fact we spend over $18,000 on average in some school districts, including school districts in this lawsuit, $20,000 to educate students. That's underfunding education. And now they want what specifically?
They want more.
How much more?
Who knows? That's why, you're not wrong in suggesting that, maybe the amount they want is not infinite, but it certainly is without limits, right? So the idea here is, goes back to some, basically a case in the late 90s that said, when four justices said, well, the state has an obligation to provide an adequate public education, and you could sue if you're not getting it. But nothing happened in that case because a majority of the justices looked at Wisconsin's school funding system and concluded that it does provide this adequate education. Now, since that time, the amount spent per pupil by public schools in the state of Wisconsin has exceeded the rate of inflation. But apparently, this is not enough, or only 45% comes from the state, and it used to be 53%, and this somehow justifies blowing up the whole system and ultimately placing it in the hands of the judiciary. And so this is why I suggest that this case is really an assault on our democratic republic. Our Constitution says that political decisions, legislative decisions, like how much to spend on schools and how much to tax people and who to tax, are things that are to be made by the legislative branch with the participation of the government, as the Constitution provides. It's not a job for judges. But this is what this lawsuit is about. It's about trying to convince four lawyers that they should raise your taxes and destroy the school choice program. It is about nothing else.
Yes,
it's an assault on what our elected representatives have chosen to do. There's no use in sugarcoating this. This is a very, very dangerous undertaking.
So when you say the four lawyers, we're talking about four women, three of whom ran on criticizing school choice and thinking school choice was somehow fundamentally, an abomination. School choice, incidentally, has been upheld over and over and over at the U.S. Supreme Court. It has been upheld over and over. They don't care. This really is about totally destroying school choice. It has nothing to do with adequate education. If you can't get an adequate education on $20,000 a year, then you need to look at why. And it's not because kids can't, be educated on $20,000 a year, because they're educating kids on $14,000 a year in Mississippi. And there's more poor kids there than there are in Wisconsin. So if they can do it in Mississippi, if a school voucher can do it for around $10,000, $12,000, and take kids that are struggling and behind in reading and make them perform better, then it isn't about money, is it?
No, look, I was a high school debater. And as you might imagine, that was quite a long time ago. And the topic, one of the years that I debated, had to do with education reform. And it was quite clear at that time from some of the studies that have done is that within the range that we're talking about in the United States, in the large run of circumstances, how much money you spend on per pupil really doesn't have much to do with achievement. And that finding has been replicated over and over and over again over the last 50 years, except in very targeted, limited circumstances. There's just no correlation between spending and achievement. But yet this is, I think, an underlying assumption of the fact that the level of funding somehow defines whether or not education is adequate. I mean, it certainly would if, we were spending $500 per pupil or some ridiculously low amount like that. But that, as you pointed out in the intro, that's not the case at all in the state of Wisconsin. We spend quite a bit, and adjusted for inflation, we spend more than we spent 26 years ago.
Right. So, and we have fewer students. We have more administrators. We have layers and layers and layers of white collar BS. Fewer students, and somehow it's just never enough. Tony Evers just signed or just vetoed into existence a $325 per pupil per year cumulating tax increase authority for local school districts. And somehow, knowing that is already hammered property taxpayers 8%, on average 17% in my case, it's not enough. Fewer kids, I guess we need another building. Fewer kids, more administrators. Fewer kids, we got to obliterate school choice, even though they get better outcomes and it's cheaper to do it. See, this is so nakedly partisan. It's so nakedly political that, one wonders how this isn't already just being laughed out of any serious consideration in a court.
Well, I mean, and again, I don't think it's unfair to say that all of this is being done at the behest of the teachers union and the educational establishment, which very powerful political interest in this state. But they haven't been able to get everything they want. And in fact, Law Forward, I think one of their tweets last night, said that, it quoted some of the parents that are the plaintiffs in this case as saying, we wanted more money from the state for our schools, but the legislators did not heed our request, something to that effect. Well, you know what that's called? It's called democracy. That's called politics, right? Sometimes your side doesn't win. And what you do when that happens is you pick yourself up the ground and you try again. Or you try to elect a legislature that would be more accommodating to what you want. You don't run to court and ask judges to be legislators.
But Law Forward does, because they're a lawfare organization. Law Forward is a you talk about naked lawfare organization. They're not there to respect the rules of the court or the ethics of the judiciary. They are there to find judicial ethics, people with judicial ethics that are flexible. That's what that organization's all about. So big middle finger to them, because they don't exist to actually defend the rule of law or really to defend the interests of parents or students. I'm told, Rick, they cited the crummy proficiency numbers. The proficiency numbers, which have been horrible forever and now have been papered over by Department of Public Instruction, that they're citing the failure of teachers to teach proficiency as a reason why there needs to be more money, even though there are fewer kids.
Yeah, I mean, the general trend in public education over a very long period of time, and you can cherry pick a number. You can take a number that was, right before Act 10, which, did result in a decline in spending per pupil, but also resulted in the decline in the cost of providing education by placing restrictions on collective bargaining. So, the thing that people don't understand about Act 10 is, it arose at a time when everybody assumed that the choice was either to dramatically cut education spending or to dramatically increase taxes. Governor Walker found a way out of that dilemma. He said, look, we can reduce expenses, and yet we can continue, to provide an adequate amount of funding to kids. And that's what he did. And, got a lot of grief for his,
so you and I.
But for what was, it got a lot of grief for, what was a pretty neat solution. at a very difficult point in time. So, you're right. I mean, the thing of it is how much you spend on education, how much you tax people, who you tax. This is not the type of thing that is resolved by judicially discernible, what we call judicially discernible principles. It's not, you don't find rules of law that will tell you what to do. It is a political decision that involves the kind of political give and take, bargaining, compromise, what have you, that, characterizes the legislative process. And that's where our Constitution placed that in the legislature.
That's not what the Democrats believe anymore. They believe that those 4 women in black robes that promised outcomes on cases when they ran are going to be there to deliver them the policy solutions that they cannot get when, by campaigning for seats in the legislature. So the whole concept of democracy has been, jettisoned by the left. They're done. The Democrats are not interested in democracy because they can't campaign on killing school choice and jacking our taxes and making a crappy education system more expensive for worse results. That's just, it doesn't sell when you're running in a district. It doesn't sell in an assembly race. Maybe it sells in Madison. You don't have to talk about it. You just say, I want to kill babies and you're good to go. So the Democrats have decided that those 4 women are going to be the ticket to the policy they can't get democratically. What happens if this plus the Act 10 case hit simultaneously? Plus, on top of that, the Wisconsin Supreme Court's rubber stamping of Tony Evers' $325 cumulative per pupil increase. I mean, what kind of fiscal nightmare are we going to be living in?
A big one. A big one, and one that, frankly, may be made worse by moving vans on the way down to Florida,
right,
with the furniture of, people who are most able to, foot the bill for that type of thing. So, this is just, and I understand, believe me, I understand the view of the law and the Constitution that's taken by organizations like Law Forward. I fundamentally and strenuously disagree with it. And, we, and I hope most of the people in your audience, Vicki, and certainly I know you, it's our job to oppose this and to oppose it vigorously.
Aggressively, vigorously, publicly,
yes. Yes.
And call it what it is. It is an assault
right.
on the concept of democracy and the rule of law itself. And here we are again. And it's not just going to be Florida. I mean, maybe for younger people, Iowa, that tax environment in Iowa is looking pretty
Absolutely.
fine. So if you like those 4 seasons, Iowa is starting to look pretty agreeable. And it's just over the border. You can just pop over the border to Iowa and, live the good life and still visit your family in southern Wisconsin without too much of a drive. Rick Esenberg, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you. Take care.